and thank you for tuning in to another episode of Murder Dictionary Podcast. My name is Brianna, and over there is Kelly.
Hey.
Before we get started, we wanted to remind you to check out our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We've had a couple people mention lately that they would like the group in Facebook to be private, so I'm changing those settings. So if you're afraid about your family seeing all the things that you love about murder,
Judging you.
you're like, why does she like necrophilia? We're going to change that so that it's a little bit more privacy friendly. Cool.
Maybe we'll get more followers because once you make something like clothes,
people are like, ooh, I want in that necrophilia.
Yeah. Exactly.
So we're going to change that. So if that was something that held you back before from either commenting or joining, definitely check it out. Going forward, it'll be private.
Join our private cult.
Do it. In addition to that, if you haven't rated, reviewed, or subscribed on iTunes, we would appreciate it if you would do that. Also, we have a few new Patreon supporters this week. We wanted to say thank you to Felicia, Kimberly, and Margaret. Thanks so much, you guys, for supporting us on Patreon. We really appreciate it. We appreciate you guys so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Bye, Felicia. I had to do it.
Every time.
I had to.
The last thing before we get started is what's going to be in the description and show notes. If you need links to resources for victims like suicide hotlines, domestic violence resources, mental health resources, CPS, the links for those will be in there. So check those out. If you need any of those, please don't hesitate to reach out to someone. And also all the articles that we've used to research this story tonight will be in our show notes as always. I think that about covers it.
Is it story time?
It's story time.
My favorite. Let me get the marshmallows. We can make s'mores, light our trash can on fire so we can just roast.
We're going to have some hobo s'mores.
It's a plastic trash can, too. It's going to be so gross.
Just
one bite is cancer.
Chemical-covered marshmallows. Ugh.
Or peeps, as you call them.
So, the story that we have tonight.
What letter are we on?
We're still on N.
Okay.
Part 2.
Woo! Nasty necrophilia part 2.
That nasty. We are still doing necrophilia, and tonight we are going to talk about Earle Nelson. He also went by the Dark Strangler or the Gorilla Killer.
Oh, shit. Not Nasty Earl?
Nasty Nelson. He was called the Gorilla Killer. I don't think I go into this in the story, but people called him that because he was a very large man, large in stature, and also had really big hands from what people recall, and receding hairline. Mm-hmm. His head looked like mad big.
Oh, okay.
And he had large lips, they said, and his complexion he was Caucasian, but he had a darker complected skin. So he was kind of big and scary, like a gorilla, basically.
How did he feel about bananas?
He's for him. Pro banana. So anyway, that's Earle Nelson, Dark Strangler or the Gorilla Killer.
Wait, but if he's the gorilla killer, wouldn't he be killing himself, or does he go after other gorilla men?
It sounds like the way that it's stated, like he would be killing gorillas,
yeah.
But it's just about the way he looks. When you boil it down, it's always about the way someone looks. So, Frances Nelson was only a teenager when she gave birth to Earle Nelson in Philadelphia, May 12th, 1897. When he was only 9 months old, Earle's mother, Frances, died of syphilis, which she had contracted from his father. After 6 months later, his father died of syphilis as well.
Oh, my God.
The family that goes to the clinic together stays together or something. Get tested, y'all.
It's 1892, bro. How do you test that? Hey, did you fuck? You got syphilis.
I know, right? Where's your cunt been? I mean, I find it interesting that his parents died so young. Obviously, he didn't have memories of seeing the bodies early on in his life, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that wasn't a direct cause, but just presence of death so early on has got to have something to do with it.
Yeah.
I think. After his parents' death, Earle went to live in San Francisco with his extremely religious grandmother, who was a widow with 2 teenage kids of her own. She loved Earle, but was already exhausted from raising her own children, so Earle was especially challenging and often tested her patience. His grandmother was strict, cold, and forced her Pentecostal beliefs on the entire household. We've already seen that always works out well.
Yeah, they change and become better people.
Yeah. Growing up in a religious family made Earle obsessed with the Bible. His grandmother required that he spend more time on studying the Bible than he would on homework. So basically, if he had homework for the night, he would have to spend an extra hour more than that. If he had an hour of homework, 2 hours on the Bible.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Bible's got some sick stories, though.
I mean, it's pretty interesting.
It's intense.
I guess that's like the old school graphic novel. There's a lot of violence.
You know what a good read is? The Bible. Thanks, Grandma.
He read it compulsively and made notes throughout the book. His grandmother tried to raise him to be an obedient and devoutly religious young man, but Earle was rebellious and headstrong from a very early age. He was even expelled from school at age 7 because of his behavioral challenges. He exhibited signs of bipolar disorder as a child and was prone to bouts of deep depression followed by manic hyperactivity. Earle was usually disheveled, unclean, and had terrible manners. People were often disgusted by the fact that he was always dirty and ate his food like an animal.
Just like a gorilla.
Exactly. The stories basically about his eating habits were that he would dump olive oil on everything. Super nasty to begin with.
For lube?
Exactly. So it just comes out the colon cleaner. And then he would just faceplant into his plate and slurp it up like a dog would eat food.
What's wrong with that? No hands.
I failed to see a problem here.
Yeah, I bob for apples, but like in a thing of spaghetti. Just put a whole meatball.
But people were just disgusted when they ate with him. Yeah, that's
Stop
so
inviting
gnarly.
him to eat.
There's like a splash zone.
Like it's SeaWorld.
This odd behavior began putting even more distance between him and the much older kids in the house. His teenage Uncle William and Aunt Lillian began calling him names, and Earle became a sad, isolated child. He would often retreat to the basement and sit in the dark. That's mad creepy.
Yeah, the dark.
Lights off, just chilling in the basement. Any kid that's comfortable with that is going to kill someone.
Unless he's meditating.
He's just a Buddhist at like 7. Earle had the habit of drifting off into long daydreams and would spend a lot of his alone time silently in the basement. Earle also began exhibiting an odd quirk that he would continue throughout his life. He would often leave the home in the morning wearing clean clothes, then return home after school wearing a completely different outfit. The clothes he wore home were usually much more worn out and dirty than his own clothes. This pattern was a mystery to his family, and Earle persisted with this odd behavior even after his grandmother tried to intervene.
I'm pretty sure that he was just being a nice guy, and there was a really gross kid at school, and he's like, look, dude, you can have my clothes. And he was just being a nice guy. That's my story.
My theory is that Earle would do that thing where you like trade a pudding cup for like some chips, but with his clothes, you know?
It seems like he got the shittier.
He wasn't good at it. I'm not saying he was good at it.
He got
duped. It was like chocolate chip chewy bars traded for hand jobs and shit. I mean, that's a good trade.
Junior
you didn't do
trades.
that? Yeah. At around 10, Earle received a hand-me-down bicycle from his uncle. He was so excited about the new bike that he began practicing tricks in the street when suddenly he was struck by a trolley and dragged 50 feet.
Wait, okay.
He's really bad at BMX.
Trolleys have visible lines where you know they're going to be coming, and they're not going fast.
He didn't do well at the X Games.
He like can see it coming, and he's just still doing his tricks.
Yep. Not the brightest to begin with.
He could have gone 2 steps left of the tracks and been fine. Done all the tricks.
That's way too far. That's too smart. After the accident, he had a hole in his temple and was in a coma for 6 days.
It's not his own fault, but it's a fucking trolley. They're going so slow.
I know, right?
It's really
how
hard
the
for
fuck
me
did he get... I have no idea how that happened, to be honest.
It's ridiculous. Maybe he was facing the opposite way and it hit him from behind, because I can't imagine he's looking at it. I'll be so mad.
You better have had your back turned or we're going to judge you so hard. Following this traumatic head injury, he became prone to headaches and dizzy spells, which were often so debilitating that he could not even walk. Me too, bro. Me too.
Definitely couldn't BMX anymore.
Right? Get your medical card, dude. In addition to the headaches, the accident seemed to exacerbate his mental health struggles, and his mood changes became more severe. Earle isolated from classmates, and when he did interact with them, he often had violent outbursts. He began shoplifting, and his grandmother was frequently called to retrieve Earle after he had been caught. He used foul language and exhibited some peeping Tom tendencies in his childhood. Earle would later admit that he had an excessive masturbation problem in his teens.
Is it bad if you're an adult? Like, define excessive?
It's just stamina training. You're going to make a girl very happy. When Earle was 14, his grandmother passed away, so he went to live with his Aunt Lillian, who had 2 children of her own. Lillian was a devoted family woman who loved her nephew, and for the most part, she overlooked his unusual behavior. She was concerned about his temper and violent outbursts, but simply did her best to keep him calm or minimize the severity. Lillian said, "He was just like a child, and we considered him like a child. And of course, we would never go too far with him, because there was always the fear of him." At 14, Earle dropped out of school for good and began a series of menial jobs. Earle's behavioral quirks and laziness made it difficult for him to stay employed for very long. He would rarely be able to stay at one job for more than a month or 2. Employers or coworkers were always frustrated by the fact that he couldn't finish tasks, and he often wandered off work sites without returning. I wish I could do that.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Fuck it, bye.
I'm just going to walk down the street real quick. I'll be right.
I just gotta get a soda. I'm going to the store. Y'all want anything? Or okay, cool, bye.
See you in 2 days.
It was just a 3-day weekend that nobody else knew about. Earle also began hearing voices and talking to himself, which even escalated to arguing with himself and concerned those around him. Earle continued his mysterious wardrobe changes at his jobs and often returned home in another person's clothing. Earle would help his Aunt Lillian with bills, and even though he didn't have a steady straight job, he was clearly making a good living, but in some less than legal ways. At only 15, he began visiting sex workers near the Fisherman's Wharf. I would never go look for some pussy by a fisherman's wharf.
Yeah, pussy
that
and
doesn't sound.
No.
There's just like seagull shit everywhere. And...
Yeah, crabs.
Yeah, like, who wants to get down in that kind of environment? Come on. Earle spent a lot of money on sex workers, pornography, and alcohol. He began disappearing for days, going on drinking binges, and returning home bruised up like he had been in a fight. As his alcoholism escalated, Lillian became more fearful for the safety of her 2 children, but she was too afraid and codependent to make him leave. In the spring of 1915, 18-year-old Earle disappeared on a bender again and broke into an empty cabin. As he was leaving the cabin, the owner returned, so Earle quickly fled into the woods. Neighbors quickly gathered to help find the intruder and successfully apprehended him. He was sentenced to 2 years and sent to San Quentin prison. He served his time uneventfully, and when he was released, he decided to enlist in the army. He gave the fake name Earle Farrell and joined the army. His poor work habits and odd behavior quickly crept into his military career. He was rumored to have stolen clothing and underwear from his fellow soldiers, but no charges were formally made.
Isn't it the same underwear and the same outfit?
Yeah, you all have the same shit. But I wonder if he did the same thing that he did with clothes. Like, he gave them clean laundry and took, like, some skid mark stuff.
I was going to say, maybe he likes BO like I do, and he's just, like, inhaling other men's shirts. But you said skid mark, and I was like, well, I don't do that.
Something. I can only imagine that that's what he did because he was always trading clean shit for dirty used shit, right?
I'm going to do that. You want to trade your shirt real quick? Take it off.
Here you go. One cold night, he was supposed to stand guard outside, but he decided to leave his post and went AWOL. When he grew tired of civilian life, he enlisted in the Navy. He was stationed as a cook in San Francisco. I think they knew he would leave. They kept him close. They're like, this fool is not sticking around. But his laziness got the better of him, and he deserted again. How do they keep letting him in? That's what I don't understand.
He got in the military twice.
Right? Oh, you wait.
Oh, okay. One with an AWOL. That's already on his record.
After he deserted, he was out for only 2 months before returning to the Navy as a medical corpsman. He went AWOL again because of, quote, burning about his anus bothered him.
Oh, I would leave too. That's just... I'll leave anything if my anus is burning.
He returned soon after, but this time the other Marines were quite worried about his obsession with the Bible, incoherent rants, and fluctuating moods. So he was committed to Napa State Mental Hospital. At least finally someone's sending him to get some help. Clearly he's having problems. Like, somebody needs to intervene.
Yeah. His mind and his butthole's all fucked up.
During the intake for his hospital stay, he said that he was an alcoholic who hadn't had a drink in 7 months. He also said that he masturbated compulsively from 13 to 18, but not since then. Blood tests revealed that he had gonorrhea and syphilis, which he apparently contracted before his 16th birthday.
Whoa, and he's had it for a long time. Can't that contribute to, like, mental...
At this point, he was in his late teens, early 20s, but still, that's years of untreated... Yeah.
That can affect your mental health,
exactly,
right? Yeah.
Especially syphilis. Yeah. In the 13 months he spent in the hospital, Earle escaped twice before being caught and returned to the facility. The other patients began calling him Houdini for his disappearing acts. In 1919, he escaped one last time, and the staff didn't bother trying to track him down.
Yeah, fuck it. Let him go.
Right? You want to be outside? Go be outside.
Yeah.
Instead of bringing him back, the facility simply discharged him from the military, stating that his condition had, quote, improved, and he was no longer violent, homicidal, or destructive. But this was clearly inaccurate. Upon his escape from the psychiatric facility, he returned to stay with his Aunt Lillian. She was concerned about allowing him back into her home, but her loyalty and dedication to family made it impossible for her to refuse her nephew. Lillian helped Earle find a job as a janitor at nearby St. Mary's Hospital. That's good. Keep him close to the hospital, like, just in case.
We're already here, man. Just check yourself in.
In case of emergency, grab an ID bracelet. While working there, he met a quiet, older woman named Mary Martin. 22-year-old Earle was attracted to the 58-year-old shy and introverted housekeeper, mostly because of her sweet maternal disposition. They began dating, and soon Earle proposed to Mary. She accepted the proposal on the condition that they have a Catholic wedding. Even though Earle's family had raised him to be devoutly Pentecostal, he didn't object to the Catholic ceremony at all. Once they were married, it became more clear that Earle was attracted to Mary for her maternal qualities. Mary was forced into the role of domineering mother, while Earle became a challenging and disobedient child. With his new wife, Earle's penchant for changing clothes progressed to stealing his wife's clothes and then horribly tailoring them into outfits for himself.
I'd be so fucking mad.
I'd be so pissed.
I love that crop top. What did you do? Those jeans should
Those are
be.
not shorts.
Yeah.
There's clearly a giant hole in the crotch. That's a shirt.
All your jeans turn into pedal pushers.
Right?
He just really likes taking people's clothes. Like
yeah. That's his shit.
I wouldn't be surprised if he wore someone's skin.
Right?
The end of the story?
Yeah.
Blink twice if I'm right.
Earle also refused to bathe, had terrible manners, and a relentless sex drive. So Mary was forced to reprimand him or control him constantly. Earle became extremely possessive and jealous, having extreme fits of rage when Mary spoke to any man, which he always interpreted as flirtatious. Even when she spent time with her own brother, Earle would get upset. When he became rageful, he would often break things, but he would not hit his wife. As the relationship progressed, it became clear that Mary could not keep up with her husband's sexual appetite. On the occasions that Mary was unable or unwilling to have sex with her husband, Earle would resort to masturbation while Mary was in bed next to him, overcome with shock, disgust, and embarrassment.
Why would you be disgusted if someone's jerking?
I mean, I think it's kind of
yeah, that's hot. I'm tired of like just finish on my thigh.
Thing.
I'll be asleep.
Or just like talk shit to him,
Yeah.
you know? Just like shame him until he comes.
Yeah.
That's a thing that people do normally, right?
So hot. What would happen if people just had fleshlights back in the day?
I mean, life-changing. It's a game changer right there. Did you ever see, there's like the first or second episode of Girls where she makes him like shame jerk off?
Yes. Oh my
Right?
God.
And he's
Yes.
just coming and saying, I'm sorry over and over again. And then she takes his money.
Yeah, and she's like disgusted and then just leaves. And
Right.
he pays for a cab, right?
Exactly.
She's like, I'm going to need cab money.
And I'm going to be needing 50 more from you. She just like keeps taking more money.
You know how much women get paid to do that
Exactly.
on Backpage? Not that I know anything about that, but still.
I'm just saying there's like solutions for this, you know?
Not back in 1915.
I guess. But I mean, she's Catholic. They're like all about shame and guilt.
Yeah.
She should know about this fetish.
Yeah. Seriously.
Since Mary was a Catholic, she believed masturbation is a sin and was repulsed by what her husband was doing. As time went on, jealousy plus Earle's sex drive and Mary's trouble coping with it drove a wedge between the couple. Earle's desire for Mary began fading, and he started looking elsewhere to find release outside his marriage. The relationship was strained, but as a Catholic, Mary felt she had to stay the course. So I found some other information in one article, but it was hard to find multiple ones that supported this. But I heard that he had actually married a second woman using a different name. He, in 1919, posed as Roger Wilson and married a school teacher. What happened in their relationship was very similar to what happened with him and Mary. His fake wife, or whatever, had a nervous breakdown within 6 months of marrying him because of his sex drive that she couldn't keep up with. And he was just constantly humping her, basically. And so she went into a mental hospital.
What?
Yes. And then he went to visit her in the mental hospital. The staff heard screams coming from her room and barged into him, like, trying to assault her.
What?
And chased him out, and he just fled the hospital.
I don't want to say someone's too horny, but
It doesn't seem possible, but maybe Earle Nelson is
Maybe.
proving some stuff right
yeah,
now.
I've never said that before in my life, but that guy is too horny.
Yeah, I read that in one source, but I didn't find it in every source. It's worth mentioning because I don't know. I mean, he would constantly lie about his identity. So it's not outside the realm of possibility that that's true, I think.
Should have just gone back to sex workers.
Right?
They don't mind. They get paid to fuck all the time.
That would solve so many problems. It
Yeah.
does solve so many problems.
I mean, he'd be broke, but it's fine.
I mean, it creates problems, but it also solves problems. Who needs money anyway when you got pussy?
yeah, I'll take a hole over money any day. Any day. Yeah, or just get a sex worker girlfriend.
Yeah.
You could fuck for free, and she's got money.
She probably comes home and doesn't want to fuck anymore, though. I mean, she's all fucked out, right?
But what that mouth do? Like, let me see your feet, baby. You just stay there. Like, just something to make all wet.
Earle's migraines became more frequent and severe, but medicine failed to give him any relief. While at work one day, he was struggling with a migraine and fell off a ladder. He hit his head on the ground and lost consciousness. He was rushed to the hospital and admitted, but he left after only 2 days. Apparently, he just walked out of the hospital, like took all the IVs out, had a big old bandage on his head, and just left. But, you know, if you're a serial killer, what helps more than one head injury is 2 head injuries.
Yeah. I can't believe he still has headaches. They were just giving out opium for fun back then.
Right?
You have cramps? Here.
Here's some cocaine. His childhood head injury had caused his headaches, but then this second head injury caused him to see visions and hear voices. His paranoia and violent rages became even worse, and Mary began to be afraid of her husband. Earle lost his job after another one of his outbursts, and he tried to persuade Mary to come with him to find somewhere else to live. Mary refused, and Earle reluctantly left, but he returned the next day, begging her to take him back. When she refused him again, he left on another one of his benders. Reeling from the separation, Earle went on a downward spiral of drinking, visiting sex workers, and breaking into houses. One day, Earle went to a home and claimed to be a repairman trying to fix a gas leak. The family let him into their home, and he went to the basement claiming to need to address the leak there.
Did he have tools? Did he look like a handyman?
I know. That I don't know.
Drunk man on your...
I just want to look.
I'm here to fix your whatever's broken.
The interesting thing about Earle is that he really was very polite, very charming, and could keep his shit together when he wanted to commit a crime.
Okay.
So all these descriptions of him and his mental health problems paint one picture. However, when he was motivated enough to actually break into someone's house and try and get something that he wanted, whether that be stealing or sexual assault, whatever, he always presented really well. Nice. And the witnesses would always say like, oh, but he was really charming. He was really nice. You know, they always had really good things to say about him. So it was clear that there's premeditation and planning and ability to kind of keep his shit together when he really wants to. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, definitely.
So I thought that too, of just like, he doesn't look like a handyman probably. He doesn't have anything with him. Who the fuck would let this person into the house? But he was able to really talk his way into a lot of situations and just be really charming and just present this image of someone that had their shit together and knew what they were talking about.
Yeah, he's also like talking to himself and doing crazy shit like that. Right. So it's weird that he can just switch it.
Yeah, it's very, very strange, but it was consistent throughout his criminal career that people would say he was able to do that.
Yeah.
It's weird. When I'm fucked up, I am fucked up. Yeah. I don't have that switch.
I feel like when I switch it and I'm doing good, and then it's not.
You're like, I look really great right now. Oh shit!
You ever do that where it's kind of like when you take a selfie when you're really fucked up and you're like, I'm gonna look so hot, my face is perfect, and then you're like, why is my eye lazy?
Upon entering the basement, Earle found the 12-year-old daughter, Mary, playing alone. Earle attempted to strangle the girl, but thankfully, she fought hard and screamed loud, alerting her family upstairs. That shit is bold. He walked right past the family and then strangled a girl in the house when he knew everyone was home. I mean, bold and stupid.
Yeah.
The family intervened and chased him out of the house, pursuing him throughout the neighborhood until he was eventually caught.
You know that family did all their own repairs from now on.
Right? Never again.
No.
Earle was taken to jail and immediately started freaking people out with his concerning behavior. On his first night in custody, he plucked his eyebrows out entirely, using only his fingernails. Then he began relentlessly screaming about seeing faces on the wall. He was quickly transferred to a psychiatric hospital. By the time his wife was notified of his arrest, he was already at the psych unit in a straitjacket and restrained to a bed.
Yeah, you're crazy if you freak people in jail out. Like
Right.
murderers and rapists. Like, that dude's weird.
This was reportedly the first that his wife Mary had heard of his mental health issues, his military desertion, or the jail time he had previously served. So there's like a lot of communication in their marriage.
Yeah.
A lot of honesty and openness.
Like a lot of relationships in the early 1900s.
Right? Even though they were having problems, she attempted to help her husband by starting the process of admitting him to involuntary hospitalization in the hopes of keeping him out of prison. When his case went to court, the doctor testified that he was destructive, incendiary, violent, and depressed. Psychiatrists advised the judge that he was a danger to himself and others. The judge filed a commitment order and sent him to Napa State Hospital, which was the same facility that he had already escaped from 3 times.
Why would they send him back there?
Right?
Jesus.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
This time, psychiatrists diagnosed him as a constitutional psychopath with outbreaks of psychosis. They were also more aware of his predilection for escape and diagnosed this as nomadic dementia.
Like a traveling person who has dementia?
Yeah, like he just kind of loses his faculties and just wants to leave somewhere.
Don't they have those really cute body harnesses like they have for babies on leashes?
Just attach it to his bed frame or something.
Yeah, like a retractable one.
Or just like attach it to the ceiling so you
Yeah.
can only go in like a 9-foot circle.
That's not so bad. I really don't think.
He's basically like a petting zoo pony at that point.
Like, regardless of being a nomadic dementia patient, he's escaped 3 times. Let's
Right.
put a fucking harness
No matter
on him.
what, someone needs some cuffs on that fool.
Or just watch him. Fuck.
Earle was required to wear restraints and still attempted to escape twice in the first couple weeks of his hospital stay.
Wait, he still escaped?
He tried to.
Oh, okay.
The hospital also began treating his syphilis, and Earle's mental health began to improve. Hospital records show that Earle was doing well with social interaction and daily life while inside the institution. His religious obsession continued, but for the most part his condition improved enough to have more privileges and trust from the hospital staff. After 18 months of progress, he began to backslide again, refusing his syphilis medication and informing doctors that he was having thoughts of attempting escape again. Don't narc on yourself, dude. On November 2nd, 1923, Earle escaped from Napa Hospital again and went to his Aunt Lillian's house. She recalls that he showed up late at night and pressed his face against her window, which terrified her and made her scream. Lillian said, "He looked so awfully insane. His eyes were just black, glaring at me, and the children rushed up to me, but of course I opened the door because he was my own flesh and kin and I loved him." Lillian convinced Earle that her home was not safe for him, so he left to find another place to stay. When he had left, she called the police to let them know that he had escaped and was in the area. Earle was apprehended 2 days later while wandering the streets. He returned to Napa Hospital, and from that point forward, there were no entries in his chart about his progress. After completing his 4-year sentence for the assault on 12-year-old Mary Summers, he was released from the facility with one last note in his chart reading, "Discharged as improved." Earle returned to his wife Mary, but weeks later he started disappearing again and wandering the streets in the middle of the night. Earle Nelson noticed a vacancy at a boarding house and approached to inquire about the room for rent. He was aware that most boarding houses were owned by single or widowed women who took in tenants as a way to generate income. The women that ran the boarding houses were also often older and took care of tenants, cooking and cleaning in a very maternal way. Earle's basically like, what's your type? Brunettes or blondes? And he's like, moms. These qualities attracted Earle to them and made boarding houses the ideal target for him. Earle knocked on the door of one such house and was greeted by 62-year-old Clara Newman. Clara was a bright and experienced boarding house owner who had several properties throughout San Francisco. Earle was well-dressed and polite, so she invited him in and informed Earle of her 2 strict rules: no drinking and no sailors.
No sailors? Are they dirty, nasty? I know they don't wear condoms, but...
Is that a thing about sailors?
It's just an Austin
They're
Powers.
raw doggers?
It's just an Austin Powers.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. I don't remember. Yeah, I don't know. I guess they were quote-unquote unsavory types back in the day.
Yeah, just hanging out on ships.
I guess that's the curse like
decks.
a sailor.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, just dirty mouth, no condoms, the plague or something.
Scurvy, the whole thing. During their conversation, Earle attacked her, but it must have been quiet because Clara's nephew was at home at the time and did not hear a struggle. Her nephew Merton Newman randomly came downstairs and was startled to find Earle in the hallway by the kitchen. Merton asked, "Can I help you?" And Earle said, "Tell the landlady I will return in an hour. I wish to rent the bedroom." Then Earle quickly ran out of the house without waiting for a response. Upon returning into the house, Merton discovered the body of his deceased Aunt Clara with her housecoat pulled above her hips. An autopsy revealed that she had been strangled with his bare hands and sexually assaulted after her death. 2 weeks later, Earle attacked another boarding house manager named Laura Beale. She was discovered in her vacant boarding house room, nude from the waist down. She had been strangled with her own undergarments and raped post-mortem. After the second identical killing, the papers caught on to the story and started reporting on the dangerous murderer at large. The only description the police had was from the first victim, Clara's nephew. The nephew, Merton Newman, had only caught a brief glimpse of the killer. The killer had worn a hat and done his best to cover his face with the brim, then look away quickly to protect his identity. The nephew Merton could only remember that Earle was a large, darkly complected Caucasian man. The papers dubbed him the Dark Strangler, and the public began calling in tips to the police. With the heightened media attention, Earle decided to lay low for a bit. Weeks passed and the public panic wore off, so people were no longer on high alert about the Dark Strangler still at large. Police had no leads and the attacks had ended, which made people believe that the man had simply fled the area out of fear. After a month went by, Earle decided to look in the classified ads for vacant rooms. He went to the home of Lillian St. Mary to inquire about renting, and she eagerly began showing him around. Lillian led Earle to the vacant unit while informing him of the price, dinner time, etc. When she stepped into the vacant room, she heard Earle lock the door behind her. She barely had time to turn around before Earle attacked her. Again, the scuffle must have been quiet because a man staying in the unit directly below did not hear a thing. Hours later, another resident walked past the vacant unit and noticed the door was open, which struck him as odd. He went inside and found Lillian's body on the bed with her dress torn and pushed up above her waist. The police noted that her eyes were bulged out in a shocking expression from strangulation, and although her hair was disheveled, her glasses were still on, leading detectives to believe that there was not much of a struggle. The autopsy showed that Lillian had been strangled with bare hands while the perpetrator sat on her chest. Then she was subsequently sexually assaulted.
Wouldn't you let every boarding house person know? After the third time.
They knew, and then he waited just long enough for people to let their guards down.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah, I think when it's immediately in the news, there's a week that goes by and people are still paying attention, and then over time...
People just forget. Yeah, you get comfortable. Shit.
The story hit the news again, and this time, a streetcar conductor had seen Earle in the neighborhood, so another vague description of the Dark Strangler was provided. Boarding house owners were warned to always show property while with another person, never alone. The police chief had confidence about his squad's abilities and said that it was only a matter of time before the criminal was off the streets. With the heightened public awareness and media attention, Earle again laid low. For 2 months, the attacks ceased, and this time, Earle even relocated down the coastline to the vacation destination town of Santa Barbara. One night, a Santa Barbara boarding house resident named William Franey woke up to a loud banging sound from the room next to his. The next room shared a door with his room, so he went to look through the keyhole. Through the keyhole, he saw what had woke him up was the sound of the headboard hitting the wall while people were having sex in the next room. He first instinctively pulled away, but then decided to have another look. It's like vintage Pornhub or something. Keyholes. Keyholes.com. He saw a man in a shabby gray suit on top of a woman who was nicely dressed, but he couldn't really see who they were. When Earle finished up and left, William suddenly realized that the woman was not moving and had not moved during the entire ordeal.
Well, he sat there from beginning to coming.
Yes. Beginning to jizz.
Yeah.
William also observed blood on the bed and thought the woman looked a lot like his landlady, Ollie Russell. Police were brought in, and it was discovered that the boarding house owner, Ollie Russell, had been strangled with a cord and violated after succumbing to the attack. The strangulation had been so severe that the loop of cord had torn the flesh from her neck, causing blood to spew all over the bed. You okay? You need a barf bag?
I'm good. I just...
Sorry.
No, it's good. Mental image.
I know. It's rough. The story was once again in the papers, but this time the press was forthcoming about the fact that Ollie Russell had been sexually assaulted after her death.
Did the cops say, they're like, we're really close. We're getting really close to catching them, like they did last time.
With no leads whatsoever.
But we're close.
But we're going to get him.
Yeah.
The papers had previously kept this disturbing detail quiet, but since it was clearly part of the killer's MO, the information was released to the press. Earle once again left town and headed up to Oakland. One day, Stephen Nisbet returned home to find his 50-year-old wife, Mary, missing. It appeared that she was in the middle of cooking dinner when she vanished, so he was concerned. I mean, he says he's concerned, but maybe he's just hungry.
He's just hungry, yeah.
You ruined Taco Tuesday. Where's my sloppy joes? At first, he told himself she had just run out briefly. Then when she didn't return, he asked neighbors if they had seen her. With no success, he returned home and looked around again. This time, Stephen found Mary's body in the bathroom of their vacant room for rent. The attack on Mary was more violent than the others, with many injuries to Mary's head. Mary had been strangled with a dish towel so violently that the towel actually ripped in half. This was Earle's most severe attack and the bloodiest crime scene. Earle again relocated to Portland, and the killings began to increase in frequency at this point. 2 days after Mary Nisbet, 30-year-old divorcee Beta Withers was found stuffed into a trunk in the attic of her boarding house by her 15-year-old son.
It's his youngest one so far. They're all 50 plus.
Right. Yeah. At this point, he kind of changes a few things. The frequency and the ages kind of vary a little bit more, and then he starts hiding them. 2 days later, Virginia Grant was found hidden behind a furnace in her basement. Then a few days later, Mabel Fluke was found in her attic crawl space. Earle was making an attempt to cover up his crimes at this point, which could either be explained by a desire to make it harder for the bodies to be found, or criminal psychologists would also theorize is a sign of the killer's shame and regret. Part of me doesn't believe that because I'm like, if you were capable of that from the beginning, you probably would have been regretful and shameful at the first kill.
You would have been hiding him since then.
Right. I'm not the expert here, but my brain is telling me that just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Either you think killing is wrong or you don't.
True.
You know? Over the next 16 months, Earle jumped from town to town, continuing his attacks throughout the Northwest. Police departments in San Francisco, Oakland, Stockton, and Portland had no clues about the identity of the Dark Strangler. The press was hard on the police and criticized their ineffectiveness to get this predator off the streets.
Yeah, did they do any canvassing? Anything?
Right.
It seems like they did nothing.
Yeah, it's very strange.
Holy shit.
Of course, they were probably doing something, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of reports of their tactic or what specifically they were doing. And I don't know if that was because they wanted to keep it secret so the killer didn't know, or if they just simply weren't doing much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Earle still had access to victims because women were either unaware of the dangerous Dark Strangler or simply too desperate to rent out their rooms to refuse showing a vacant unit to a potential renter. I think that had a lot to do with it because a lot of these women that owned the boarding houses, they were doing it because they desperately needed income. It was too hard to make a living, and that was just a way for them to use their property to make income. And so they're like, well, I have to rent this room. It's vacant. I have no choice. I have to show it.
It's like old school Airbnb, but you get dinner.
Exactly. Blanche Myers gave Earle a tour of her boarding house one day. He gave her $4 for the room rental and said he was a lumberjack looking for local jobs. Blanche's body was later found under the bed of the vacant unit.
I'm keeping a shotgun in my hand, showing everyone a room and
Right?
pointing to the room. Well, here's your bed. Here's that. Any questions?
Exactly.
There's the front door. Oh, you do want to rent the room.
You would have been a great boarding house owner. Before leaving, Earle took Blanche's diamond engagement ring and money from her purse. This was also a new pattern for Earle. He had always made his living in less than legal ways, and this wasn't the beginning of him stealing. But previously, he would hurry out of the house after his attacks. Now that he had some experience, Earle would take this time at a crime scene and look around for valuables to steal before leaving. By the end of 1926, Earle Nelson had killed 14 women and an 8-month-old baby. He supported himself by working odd jobs and more recently by pawning items stolen from his victims. In Portland, police were able to track down where Earle was staying after he pawned some jewelry from his victim, Mary Nisbet. The landladies at the boarding house that he had actually stayed at had nothing but nice things to say about their homicidal tenant. The women described Earle as a pleasant, quiet young man who studied the Bible and left suddenly without paying what remained of his bill. With the police tracking him down, Earle headed east to Kansas City, on to Philadelphia, then Buffalo, New York, to Detroit, then finally Chicago. By the time he ended up in Chicago, Earle had killed 20 women, most of them with his bare hands. Earle Nelson then crossed into Canada from Minnesota and headed towards Winnipeg. His first stop in Winnipeg was a second-hand clothing store where he traded his fancy outfit for workman's clothes and $1 cash. Knowing that he did this almost makes it make sense that he had done this his entire life. There's part of me that thinks he used his clothing as a bartering system from day one, whether it be at secondhand clothing stores or just with another person. Like, look how nice my clothes are. I'll trade you what you're wearing for $1.
And a snack pack.
Right? Is that butterscotch? So I think that was part of a little side hustle that he was putting on since he was a child. But I don't know if that's 100% true, but this kind of shows that might be a plausible theory.
One good quality, he's not materialistic.
Right? Always looking on the bright side.
Yeah.
Earle headed to the boarding house belonging to Catherine Hill and charmed his way into actually renting a room. He called himself Earle Woodcoats and gave her the $1 he had, promising to pay her the other $3 rent when he got paid on Friday.
$3 rent.
I know.
Oh
That's a total of $4 a week. I know. Also, that's really trusting. They must be kind of desperate, to just be like,
yeah.
oh, you can stay for only $1. That's a quarter of the rent, and then pay me on Friday.
And he was charming.
Right? That would never fly with the 10 crack commandments.
No. Mm-mm. Consignment. Strictly for linemen. Not for freshmen.
On the same street as his boarding house, Earle met a 14-year-old girl named Lola Cowan. The girl had been going door to door selling paper flowers in hopes of helping her family bring in extra money. Her father was recovering from pneumonia, and Lola was trying to be creative about how to get her family through hard times.
Pick up a lawnmower. Stop selling fake flowers. What the fuck?
It must have worked, though. I think that people knew her around town for,
Aw.
selling flowers and stuff.
They're probably so pissed every time she came by. It's like, oh, fuck, I gotta pay for
flower
this
brought
shitty-
again?
Yeah. Just a piece of paper.
Neighbors never saw Earle and Lola together, but somehow he must have convinced her to come back to his boarding house room with him. Lola went missing, and nobody ever saw her alive again. A couple days after Lola's disappearance, a woman named Emily Patterson mysteriously disappeared as well. She was supposed to pick up her children from a play date, but never showed up. Her husband, William Patterson, reassured his sons that their mother would be home soon, but he was terrified about what had happened to her. William knelt down to pray about it before going to bed, and upon moving the blanket slightly, he noticed his wife's body under the bed. He tried to grab her hand and discovered it was cold. An autopsy revealed that she had been strangled and sexually assaulted. Authorities knew that this was the work of the Dark Strangler. In addition to the murder, a substantial amount of cash was stolen from the Patterson home. William Patterson was planning on starting a business, so he had been saving up for quite a while. Earle had found their stashed savings and took a large sum of money. When news of the crime made the papers, it was reported that the murderer had also stolen a large sum of cash. Winnipeg residents noticed a new man in town flashing around rolls of money, but nobody reported it. Canadian police decided to be extremely swift and aggressive in their search for this madman. They began a canvass of all local boarding houses, inquiring if anyone had seen a man fitting that description. See, that's how you do it.
Thank you, Canada. Fuck.
Catherine Hill said she had seen a large American man staying in her home, but insisted a nice Christian man like Earle Woodcoats wasn't capable of this kind of atrocity. It's a consistent theme with everyone. Everyone thinks he's nice and he's Christian and
That Christian thing will get you, or that Catholic thing will get you,
Right?
whatever the religious thing. He can't
I
do
saw a
anything.
cross, so he good.
He's fine.
The police left since Catherine said the man they were looking for was not in her home. When they left, Catherine decided to check on her tenant. She knocked on Earle's door, but there was no answer. Catherine let herself into the unit, and upon opening the door, there was clearly the stench of decay in the room. The scene was odd to Catherine because Earle had left raw meat out in the room, which she assumed accounted for the smell. Plus, the towels were still folded, and appeared no one had slept in the bed. She assumed Earle had skipped out on her without paying and was furious.
And left raw meat? That's really fucking me up. I don't get it.
I think that was a tactic to throw people
smell?
off the trail or whatever. Another tenant was coming up the stairs as Catherine was looking around the room. And from his low angle on the stairs, he noticed what he thought must be a mannequin leg under the bed. The tenant and landlord looked closer and discovered the body of the missing paper flower girl, Lola Cowan, who had been murdered in the same fashion as the Dark Strangler's MO.
Poor Lola. I'm sorry
Yeah.
for making fun of her flowers.
I know.
That's so sad.
Mean.
Well, I mean, just which one would generate more cash?
I hereby sentence you to making 100 paper flowers.
Hard labor or arts and crafts?
The small Winnipeg community was much more tight-knit than other cities Earle had killed in, and the police were more proactive than the places he had previously traveled. Most Winnipeg residents were in high alert looking for the mysterious man, in addition to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police Force. Knowing he was no longer safe in Winnipeg, Earle attempted to leave the city and head back to the U.S. While en route to the American border, Earle hitched a ride and told his fellow passengers that he had worked on a ranch near Winnipeg. Apparently, people in Canada would not refer to land that far west as a ranch, because the correct local term would be farm. So Earle immediately struck them as suspicious.
Ooh, yes.
It's just a subtle difference, but it makes a difference. Since there was a reward out for Earle, these men reported the hitchhiker to police. Due to this tip, police were able to predict his route and travel ahead of him in hopes of apprehending him. Police distributed his description to authorities in the local border towns, warning them to be on high alert. Earle stopped in a general store in Wacopa to buy food, where he was recognized by both the store owner and a customer. Both people were aware of the $1,500 reward and notified the police. Earle could feel that he was spotted, so he fled towards the railroad tracks and headed south on foot. He made it about 1.5 miles out of town before the local constable appeared in front of him with his gun drawn. Earle Nelson immediately put his hands up and surrendered. Upon initial interrogation, Earle insisted he was a day laborer named Virgil Wilson, who had no knowledge of the murders. He cooperated fully and was so charmingly convincing that they began to believe that they may have caught the wrong man. Police had an idea in their heads about the kind of monster capable of these heinous crimes, but the man at their precinct did not fit this image. They couldn't deny that his size and coloring matched the description, but they had their doubts.
But he's so charming.
Right?
He's cracking
It's always
jokes.
the way it works. The more charming they are, the more capable they are of murder. Just go on that.
You're pretty charming.
Exactly. Earle was put in a cell, and the officers went to send a telegraph to the Winnipeg precinct about the man they had captured. When they returned, they discovered that Earle had picked the double lock and escaped without being seen.
Clever.
Clever girl.
Clever. I watched Jurassic Park last night.
Right? Amazing. All available officers and community members were gathered to capture the killer at large, who was heading for the border. Earle took shelter in an old barn for the night and headed out the next morning. While walking, he ran into a farmer and bummed a few cigarettes. The farmer recalls that he was polite and seemed very calm. None of his behavior indicated that he was on the run or in such a stressful situation. That's creepy to me. You were on the run, about to be captured. You just got captured last night, and you're just cool as a cucumber.
So cigarettes, man.
They just chill you the fuck out.
Mm-hmm.
However, the farmer knew that police were looking for a man matching the stranger's description, so he reported the sighting to police. Earle made it only a few hundred yards down the road before being apprehended once more. Once he was in custody again, witnesses were gathered to identify Earle Nelson as the man they had seen during the killing spree. After a week in custody, over 40 people positively identified Earle as the killer in lineups or photographs. Merton Newman, the nephew of the first victim who had seen Earle as he was leaving the boarding house, was a key witness, as well as boarding house owner Catherine Hill, who had rented a room to Earle only to discover Lola Cowan's body under his bed. As the witnesses came forward, police were able to piece together a more complete picture of one method he used to avoid detection. Apparently, Earle would visit the barber and get a fresh shave before visiting a vacant boarding house. He would dress nicely, speak politely, and carry his Bible. The women let their guard down when dealing with the clean, polite Christian man, which made it easier for him to find victims. Once the crime was committed, Earle would grow out his hair and beard to appear more shaggy and look different than the description witnesses were providing. He would also switch to wearing older and more raggedy clothes. This tactic would make him appear to be two different people and make it harder to identify him. Earle Nelson finally admitted his real name, but continued to maintain his innocence. Earle said, "Murder just isn't possible for a man of my high Christian ideals." His defense attorneys asked for a postponement, saying the media frenzy was too intense for Earle to get a fair trial. The lawyers argued that he was already convicted in the court of public opinion, and the public needed time to calm down before it was possible for him to get a fair trial. Within weeks of his arrest, Earle was indicted in various states for the crimes committed across America. Before he could go back to his home country, he needed to have his trial for the crimes committed in Canada. Detectives came from different states to interrogate him, hoping to close their open murder cases before the Canadian cases went to trial. U.S. authorities were afraid that Earle would never make it back to the U.S. to answer for his crimes, because it was expected that he would get the death penalty. There were also many open cases that fit Earle's MO, where detectives suspected him but didn't have enough evidence to charge him. They were hoping that Earle would confess, but he refused to cooperate and insisted he was an innocent, godly man. Earle Nelson's trial was a straightforward affair with very little drama. Although people perceived Earle as a polite, well-mannered man, many witnesses pegged him as the killer. The defense argued insanity and called his family as witnesses to this. His wife and other family members did their best to convey his lifelong history of bizarre behavior and hospital stays. But the testimony was perceived as a desperate attempt to save Earle. The public viewed it as more emotional than factual. The prosecution even had success in their cross-examination of the defense's psychiatrist. The defense's doctor diagnosed Earle Nelson as a constitutional psychopath. But when pushed for a definitive answer, the doctor said he believed Earle was legally sane. You think that they would have practiced that and made sure before they put him on the fucking stand,
Yeah,
right?
probably.
Like, you're supposed to be our witness. Let's make sure that you've got all this, like, the facts straight that we want you to say, right?
Just wing it.
After less than an hour of deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict, and the judge sentenced Earle to death. People recall that Earle stared blankly during the sentencing, as though he didn't understand or didn't care. His execution date was set for 60 days after the trial. Earle began an intense campaign to prove his innocence, filing appeals and doing many interviews in an attempt to win over the public's sympathy.
Innocence? Not even just I'm insane.
Right, no,
Just-
I'm innocent, flat out. Yeah, the fucking balls on this guy.
Yeah.
The High Court did not grant his appeal and ordered the execution to proceed.
Bravo, Canada.
They did everything right in this situation.
Go, Canada.
On the day before his execution, Earle Nelson met with family members of two of his victims, including Lola Cowan's mother. In these conversations, he still maintained his innocence. Even at the time of his hanging, he was still proclaiming that he was innocent. He told reporters that he had made peace with God. Then stepped up to the gallows.
Oh, as long as he made peace with God, I'm good.
Then everything's cool, right?
Fuckity fuck that guy.
It's the official stance. Fuck that guy.
Fuckity fuck that guy.
So that's the story of the gorilla killer.
Ugh.
I know.
The tan strangler. That's it's just not even the
The
dark.
fake and bake strangler. I know. That's a lot of women. And because he traveled so much, there were other crimes that matched his MO that aren't officially attributed to him, but the official number is in the high 20s, but it's probably more. It's probably in the 40s or something like that.
It was nice, trusting women who were like, "Yeah, sure, I'll rent you a room and you
were
could
just
pay
trying
me
to
back."
make a living.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like people who did him favors
Right.
by
They were
not
trying
kicking him
to
out.
take care of people, you know?
Never trust a Christian man.
Never.
Mm-mm.
Mm-mm.
Nope.
See that Bible and run the other way.
Run the oh God. Nope.
I see your Bible and I match you a cock punch.
Oh my gosh.
So that's Earle
was
Nelson.
sad.
I know. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I mean, it's
But it's necrophilia, so it's not going to be happy.
yeah.
You know what'll cheer you up?
What?
iTunes reviews.
My favorite time.
This week we have 2 additional iTunes reviews that we want to shout out. The first one is from Amber, who called the show funny and addicting. She says that we have good chemistry and a good dose of humor added to the grim topics. Thank you so much, Amber.
Thanks, Amber.
We appreciate you. The second one is from Allie, who says she loves the podcast and has been binge listening for a few days.
Binge it out. Get some Cheetos and
I
just
so relate
binge.
to that. So thank you so much, Allie and Amber.
Thanks, Allie and Amber.
And once again, we also want to thank our Patreon supporters for this week, Margaret, Kimberly, and Felicia. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
And the link for our Patreon is also going to be in the show notes if you want access to that. We have bonus episodes and merch coming, so
Nudes.
definitely check out.
Swear those
Ellie's
nudes. I'm working on my body, so once I get that right, or I find a better angle.
It's all about the angles. So if you haven't followed us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, definitely run over there and check those out. Give us a follow. We've got news, breaking stories, memes, a lot of shit talking about serial killers, and new episode info. If you want to check out any of the articles that we researched for this episode, they will be in the show notes as well, and links to victims' resources like suicide hotlines, domestic violence support, CPS.
I think that's it.
There's more. I put a bunch of them
Oh, well, there's a lot.
If you haven't already, please go rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes. We would really appreciate that, and we would love to say thank you. So I think that wraps it up for us, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Cool. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Don't fuck the dead.
Texting enrolls you into reoccurring automated text messages. Message and data rates may apply.
Come on, one more rep. You got this.
10.
There it is. Nice work, man. You're a beast.
Thanks, man. I feel better than I have in years. And I got to tell you, taking Nugenix makes a huge difference for me.
Nugenix? That's the testosterone booster with TV ads with Frank Thomas. The big hurt, right?
Oh, yeah. This is a legit product. The key ingredient is testofen, which helps boost free testosterone levels and increase lean muscle mass.
Well, it's clearly working for you. Hey, are they still giving out complimentary bottles for people to try it for themselves?
Yeah, Nugenix is a great way to increase lean muscle and feel stronger with more energy and endurance.
Man, I need to get a complimentary bottle of Nugenix.
No problem. You just got to send them a text. Text BODY to 42424 right now for your complimentary bottle of Nugenix, the #1 selling free testosterone booster at GNC. Nugenix samples are not available in stores, so text BODY to 42424 right now. Text BODY to 42424. That's BODY to 42424.
With the Quicksilver Card from Capital One, you earn unlimited 1.5% cash back on every purchase. Unlimited? Unlimited? Unlimited! 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 Any way you say it, earning unlimited 1.5% cash back on every purchase just sounds good. Capital One. What's in your wallet? What's in your wallet? What's in your wallet?
Capital One Bank USA, N.A.